Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Libertarian TexMex podcast. I am the Libertarian TexMex, Caesar Aguirre. It's been a while. I haven't done a podcast in, I would say, several months, but it has been a crazy month, crazy several months, as you know. We're dealing with a lot of things going on, and, to be honest, just had to put this on the back burner to take care of life. Luckily, nothing super life-threatening. Well, besides the coronavirus, but in terms of me personally, nothing too crazy in the sense that my work just increased tenfold, so I was a little bit overwhelmed, but also taking care of my wife, my house, trying to navigate through this new way of living. Definitely very difficult. And then obviously, I'm sure as many of you have probably experienced as well, just the ups and downs of energy, right? Because I think if you're anywhere in a zone, a hot zone like I am in the Houston area, there's some real threats of going out. And so you have to put a lot of more effort and energy into being able to even just go out. And then for the most part, we're staying home, only leaving when we need to, or if we have to get out. And that takes a toll on your energy, right? And your emotions. And I think, the ups and downs that we're all feeling um, is definitely a part of that journey that we're all going through. So it took a little bit of time for me to figure out this new, you know, um, way of energy that is being presented, right? Meaning like your peaks of energy, like when you have the energy to muster up and do something, or what you put your time into, what's going to be the focus now. And I think that definitely all changed for a while. I think for a while it was a little bit. I know me personally. I think I had a lot of stress going on in terms of just overall stress, not just work, but work, work, family, the world in general, a lot of that pressure building up. And I think for me personally, a lot of it was about um, accepting this reality that we're in, that we're not where we were, you know, January, February, right? We're in this new world. And what does that mean, right? What does that mean in terms of my personal habits? What does that mean in terms of my goals? And then obviously, it's made a pretty big impression test on our political views. And I think everybody's been on Facebook to see that, or social media in general, to see that politics and our political bias, everyone, is dominating the conversation, you know. And I don't want to say like I can't say that this is you know the first time in history that politics is running the gamut of topics. There's plenty of examples in history where that's happened. But I would say that if anybody's been out there engaging in politics for the last 10, 20 years, you definitely know that it's been dialing up and up and up. And then finally we just hit a pressure, a pressure cooker point where now it's like insane. And then you take on top of that, people at home more, people getting on social media more, feeling that the stress and the pressure of things going on. You can see that, right? It's either, there's a pressure of we're, locking down too much, or people losing their jobs, so there's an economic pressure there, or on the other side, in terms of medical, right? That there is a real viral spread that is could harm us health wise. So people are worried about that as well. So there's a lot of things that not even on just both of those topics, but all the things that add to that, right? Family pressure, financial pressure, like you said, emotional pressure, that type of thing. All of it is at an all-time peak. and we're all trying to go through it. So, you know, before I get into things, just want to say that I know, I mean, we're all human. We all go through that. We all feel pressure. We all feel angst. We feel aggressive. We feel depressed. We feel sad. We feel happy. We feel all those things. And I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is when we're getting into those topics of politics or, world events, keep that in mind when you're going through that stuff. It's kind of like a check yourself, right? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Um, you definitely want to be aware of where you are emotionally. And sometimes it's not always in a good spot, right? Sometimes we are already feeling angst or we're feeling, sadness or whatever it is. And then we engage in Facebook, and then that emotion is just driving our conversations. So keep yourself in check. And I say that to myself as well because um, me, I've been engaging in so much conversation on those two pillar topics, right? The economy and the coronavirus, and the impacts that we're feeling. So we're definitely in a territory that we haven't really experienced. These last, you know, 2, 3, 4 generations have not experienced. So we're going through something relatively new, right? The last people that went through, a pandemic, an economic depression that we are getting to, they are in the elderly group, and unfortunately, the elderly group is dying off because of coronavirus. So the people who actually have the experience, who have been through this, are passing, and I think that presents a unique problem in the sense that we none of us have gone through this, and we are learning as we go, and hopefully, we can look at our history books, we can look at a lot of that stuff, and hopefully take from those wisdoms about what people did and didn't do to get through those things. But I definitely think this new 2020 world is definitely making us rethink about what we value. And I think that's a good thing, right? I think libertarians have already been on that path, in terms of what are our core beliefs in the political sense, but also personally, right? What are our personal views? Do we want people to have that capability to live the life they want to, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what does that mean, right? At the core of it, I don't think any libertarian, and obviously, libertarians are kind of laissez-faire in the sense that you can do what you want as long as you're not hurting other people. But I think for the most part, libertarians are fairly frugal. I would say not frugal, but it's definitely like I don't know any libertarian that's about just blowing their money on things. Um, and I think most libertarians want to have stability in the home. They want, you know, uh, some good, healthy family dynamics. Um, and I don't think that is specific to, you know, I'm sorry, opposite sex. I think maybe I think we understand that same-sex marriages or whatever the dynamic is doesn't really matter, right? As long as we are having a healthy home that's supporting the environment, right? And I think that has really cued in recently, right? It's who are our core um, network of people that we can depend on. And sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's a partner. Whatever it is, we know that we need that right now, and we need to help each other out, right? And this is just even before we talk about, you know, politics or libertarian topics like government intervention or regulation. All that stuff is so like so way down the line, you know. And I think that's one of the things that, in terms of the libertarian principles, that idea that the individual is responsible for their own safety, their own health, their own protection, that at the core, regardless of whether there is a government to support or not support that, you should be doing those things on your own, right? If you can, right? And if you can't, then we need to get ourselves to that position, to that point. And then if we see others struggling with that, then we also should find a way to volunteer the assistance to help other people. And that's before we even talk about if it's a government program or not a government program, right? Once we get into those nuances, then we have to look at it and go, is this effective? Is it not? Is there a better way to do this, right? Obviously, all those things we get into as libertarians, but I think right now we definitely are honing in on our core values, right? It could be our network, our family and friends, helping our community, you know, not overspending, right? I mean, you look at what we talk about libertarians is in budgets. Always talk about government not overspending, right? That they have a balanced budget, all that stuff. You guys better be doing the same thing, right? Looking at all your expenses, looking at stuff and going, do we need this? Do we not? Is it excess? Can we get rid of it? All those things on the personal finance side that we say the government should be doing, you should be doing as well, right? Don't not, especially right now that we're kind of in tough waters economically, are you blowing your money on stuff that you shouldn't be, right? Maybe we should take a couple less trips, maybe we should start making coffee at home instead of Starbucks, stuff like that. How much money we're putting away in savings, etc. Right? So all that stuff is absolutely very important, and that's the same stuff that we expect from our government, right? To be to have good, sound money principles, to help people. And making sure that our programs are working the way they should be, both in the short term and long term, right? So you take that and you have a dynamic view of how libertarians see things, and that's when we get into the coronavirus. Right now, we'll talk about the coronavirus and then the economy because they're both inextricably linked. Um, and I think the more we look at it, the more we realize that really this coronavirus situation needs to be resolved if we want our economy to be where it was, right? Which, unfortunately, honestly, I don't think it's going to be where it was. I think we'll have to get into it. I'm going to skip that for now because there's a lot of um, economic realities that we have to face. But the coronavirus is, I would say, the immediate threat, um, and I think it's a topic that a lot of people have a hard time dealing with because I think a lot of us, like I said, we were already in a position where it was, you know, um, you know, politics was already polarizing, right? You have the far right and the far left, and the conversation in the middle, right, where libertarians usually are, libertarians and independents and moderates, where these people can meet together and have some similar conversations and agree on something to agree on some form. These people are just being totally outspoken by the far left and the far right. And the far left, far right game is a winner take all type of thing, right? It's all or nothing. And unfortunately, those types of things just, they, from a data standpoint, in terms of a historical standpoint, they don't last long, right? And I think, groups that are coming up in the limelight, I think are going to realize that. I think they're going to realize that you have an extreme view, but the reality is that our system is too diverse, and you're going to have to find a starting point, and that starting point is going to be something it's going to be something a little bit more condensed, and then we can obviously build ourselves out from there. But I think it's really important that one of the things that I've always tried to do myself is to be data driven first, right? And I don't want to say science based, but definitely it's a major influence. And you want to look at evidence based, maybe for a lot of people. Maybe you're not looking at data or science and what does the research say, but maybe you're looking at evidence, right? Evidence in terms of what are the numbers being reported, what are professionals saying, right? Professionals in the field of whatever you're talking about. Is there some type of consensus? What's the majority consensus? What's the minority consensus? Looking at all those things, then you get a better idea of what the reality is of that situation before you even input your own idea. But I think for sure, data-driven politics. I want to see, I mean, not even say politics, but it's like just data-driven in general. Of most topics in my life, I've really tried to be a little bit more like that. Sometimes most of the time, let me say, most of the time, you really get into a lot of libertarian fundamentals, about economics, healthcare, all the other stuff. And sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes we have ideas, even we have to admit as us as libertarians is more theoretical than it is practical. And I think it's totally okay to admit that and say, our ideal is this. But, if we can do something that's in between, or do something that gets us at least in the direction of that ideal, then I think that's a good concession. So I definitely don't want to advocate for extremism because I think those situations, you tend to drown out um, ideas, alternatives that could get you in a better position than you, instead of you just waiting for your utopia, right? You're going to wait 300-400 years for the utopian ideal that you want versus incrementally moving us in that direction of your idea, right? So I think that's something definitely that libertarians should look at. But also, I think if you're not a libertarian, right? If you're conservative, if you're a liberal, progressive, whatever it is that you're already feeling, um, try to find some middle ground. I think it's really important right now, especially with everything that's going on, the way our politics is pushing through. I think it's very important that we try to come together. We try to put our differences aside. We try to find that common ground, the middle ground, and get something going. Even me, like I think, even as a libertarian, I think before this whole coronavirus thing, it was obviously limited government, right? That was um, kind of the central theme that most people think libertarians are is limited government, or actually a lot of people think no government at all. And I think we've covered some of these topics, right? That the spectrum of libertarianism is very broad in the sense that you have, to the far end of this of our spectrum is like anarcho-capitalists who believe in no government, right? No police, no fire, no federal government, no state, that each community on their own decides who's going to police, who's going to do the policing, who's going to do the fire, who's how you elect your own government. It's all volunteer, right? That's the whole one end, right? Then you have on the other end people who are classically liberal, right? That who believe a government is important, that a government is for the people, right? For the people, by the people, and that we are doing efficient government systems that help people more than it does hinder them, and that it is protecting their individual rights from being infringed upon by the government. But they still believe in a government. So you have this spectrum of belief, and no one person is right. You know, um, these are all different views. These are all different views that all fold into this concept of libertarianism, which is okay, right? And I think that's another part maybe we have to realize, especially nowadays that we're all kind of arguing with each other a lot, is that we don't have to agree with each other, right? And that maybe that's not the end goal, is that I win my argument, right? Maybe, if anybody knows me, I love a challenge. I love a good challenge, right? I love being challenged and I love challenging other people. To me, it's like a test. let me test this theory, right? What about this? What about this? What about this? Have you thought about this? And same thing for me, when people push back on me, it's about testing the dynamics of your idea. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that conversation needs to be had. Right now, we need to be talking about these things, but we also need to understand that at the end of the day, these are our friends, our family, our community. And even though maybe we kind of, bust each other's chops a little bit, maybe we're getting a little heated, that we are at the end of the day still a community, right? And we need to help each other out at the end of the day. So, um, just be careful. Now, obviously, there's like trolls out there, and if sometimes you guys know out there, I'm a troll too. Like, especially when other people are trying to be trolls, I control all day, right? But I personally would prefer an easier conversation about sharing ideas. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me. Doesn't mean I have to agree with you. But we're still going to have that conversation. And honestly, I think my experience, a lot of people sometimes they're a little bit bah humbug about it, in the sense that they don't think anybody's going to change their mind. But honestly, I've probably seen um, people who either messaged me out and said, "Hey, I didn't even know anything about this libertarian stuff. It's really interesting. And I like what you say." So now they're interested in learning more about what libertarianism is. And you know, the Libertarian platform, I'm probably like the Libertarian Party platform, I'm probably about 80, 90% in line with them, right? So I'm totally okay with that. I don't expect anybody to be 100% with me, right? And that's okay. I would prefer people to group together on common concepts and allow that flexibility for other ideas to come in. So I think that's where I really enjoy the conversations, and what we can do about them. So I think coronavirus in general, you look at the data, you look at the growing cases, the mortality rate, the infection rate, all that stuff. I think the best thing for people to do is look at this from a non-political lens, right? First, look at what is the medical community saying, right? What is our county reporter saying, right? Our judge, right? What are the numbers? What are they telling us? What are the professionals telling us to do in terms of medical? Um, and then you insert your politics on the back end in terms of how to resolve it, what we need to do, etc. Right? I think that's okay. But I think if you do it the other way, where you look at what are my political views and then how do I fit this into the reality of the situation, I unfortunately think people are going to get themselves into trouble. And obviously, libertarian is totally about volunteerism. So obviously, these people have to decide for themselves what's best for them, right? But likewise, the libertarian view on the non-aggression principle, meaning I don't aggress or push onto people my own beliefs, but if they push back on me, I have the right to protect myself, right? I think there's a good conversation there to possibly say, okay, when we have people in the public sphere interacting with each other, we need to have some protections so you don't violate somebody else's right to freedom. And I think that there's a good argument there to say that people aren't wearing masks, people who aren't social distancing, people who are throwing parties and getting other people sick, that they need to be responsible, right? Or they need to have that barrier between you violating my rights, because you think that you're free to do whatever, right? So I think there is a good conversation that needs to be had about what the rules look like in the public sphere versus your private home or your private business. Um, and I think, so I think when we look at, cases like the Houston area, who has a severe case of coronavirus and the infection rate is really high. When they put out mandatory mask orders, stay at home work orders, all that other stuff, I think as a libertarian, obviously the initial flinch reaction is to go, that's my freedom to go out and do what I want, when I want, etc. But when you look at it from a practical standpoint, you say, okay, if I go out, and somebody else has it, they're going to get it to me, and that violates my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? Or the other way, right? The other way is, what if I have it and I get someone else sick? I am violating their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So either way, you know, this mask order, whether it's a mandate, right, or it's volunteer, needs to happen, right? And then when you look at the medical advice to say these things help when you're out in public, like a regular cloth mask is okay. Um, Obviously, if you're in a hospital, you need something more severe when you're around people who are sick. But if you're just walking around in a normal environment around other people, this is the logical thing to do. So I think what I try to tell people is, regardless of whether a government entity is telling you to do this or not, wear a face mask, practice social distancing, stay at home if possible. I think that you need to use your common sense, right? Have some instinct for survival is kind of what I'm telling people. Is like, people who are refusing to wear a mask when they go out into stores or in public. For me, I'm like, do you have a survival instinct? Like, do you not want to not get sick or not get your family sick or potentially die? Like, where's your survival instinct? That's what I say. So even at the individual level, I go, regardless of whether a government entity told you to do it or not, you need to do it, right? Protect yourself, right? Self-protection, right? Self-protecting and protecting your family and protecting your home and protecting your health. Those are core libertarian concepts, right? So you need to make sure you are taking care of yourself, regardless of whether somebody's telling you to do it or not. You need to do it. Now, when we go into the weeds of regional mandates or state mandates or federal mandates, then you go into what what relationships do you have in terms of who is in charge of what. And I think when we were looking into the Texas law in terms of emergency management, the county judge or the city does have that regional flexibility to say, hey, we're in an emergency mode, and we need some cooperation. Now, the state obviously can intercede, the state governor or whatever, and say, we're going to allow it or we're not going to allow it. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's, very regionally specific, right? Because I think, especially for the state of Texas, you have some counties that are like, people are so far spread out from each other that the chances of them getting coronavirus are going to be very slim. But you have some other regions like Houston, San Antonio, the major populated areas, where just how close and how quickly people interact with each other is going to create a problem, right? So I think having the flexibility at the state level to say, statewide, counties and cities need to make their own judgments off of that, and the state will provide the support for medical equipment, testing, etc. I think that would probably be the best situation. And if each of those counties mandates it or doesn't, well, then you have the power and pressure to influence those local people to say, our cases are getting bad, you need to do something. And in terms of violating the obvious civil rights, I don't think wearing a mask does violate the civil rights. I mean, you can still practice your religion, or speak in public. You can do it on Facebook. You can do a Zoom. You still have the ability to express your ideas. You can still own your guns, right? The police can't go to your home without a warrant. All those things that are in the core of the Constitution, none of these are being violated by wearing a mask, right? or asking people to be socially distant. So I think in terms of that nuance of how can we, how can the government move in here? I think there's room for that, in terms of we need to get everybody to wear a mask. You can still, you know, talk all you want. You can still own a gun as long as we're not infringing on those, right? I think we should be able to say, hey, look, this is the minimum that we can do, right? We can wear a mask, we can be social distance, and we can minimize our movements. I think at the bare minimum, um, that should be able to be done by libertarians, right? Especially if when you think about it in terms of you violating other people's right, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by getting them sick, or other people getting you sick, and they're violating your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because you're getting sick. And we're seeing all the cases, in terms of all the data, right? Um, you know, you know, positive test cases are skyrocketing, right? And the positivity rate is still really high, right? And the mortality rate, I think nationally is at like maybe 4% right now. And that's not good for a virus, right? You take the flu or common influenza, the mortality rate of an influenza is like 0.001 or 0.01 or something like that. So the scale from 0.01% to 4% is massive. So we definitely need to, I want to say all hands on deck, but for sure, right? As an individual, as a community, as our corporations, our companies, our governments, state, local, and federal, they all need to be working together. And unfortunately, it sounds weird for a libertarian to say that, but they need to work. They for sure need to work, right? And they need to allow, each of those areas of pockets to contribute in their own way, right, without impeding them. And I think that cooperation is going to be able to get us out of the situation that we're in. And I think if anybody looks at the rate of progress, in terms of positive cases, mortality rates, they're just going through the roof. And then, if you look ahead, we have wintertime. We have, typical cold, flu, influenza, pneumonia, all those things that we deal with already that have already a human toll. Those things are going to get compounded in the wintertime. So I think it's very imperative that whether we're libertarians or we're conservatives or progressives or liberals or whatever, that we try to work together. We find some common ground, um, and try to work this out, right? We obviously we want to make sure that no civil liberties are being violated, in terms of being able to express our ideas or own a gun, or um, that we're not, being biased, towards other people, prejudice, discrimination, all that stuff that we people are still protesting right now for. Um, that we make sure that we can navigate through this tough time, because I really do think it's a unique time that we haven't experienced in over 100 years, and we're going to be going through that, and we'll have to figure that out, as a group, as partners, really, right? Public-private partnership, right? That's a libertarian idea. What can we do as a private? What can we do privately? What can we do publicly? And then how can we work together? That cooperation isn't happening just yet, right? Obviously, our politics, our um, divisiveness. I don't want to call it divisiveness, but our polarization, right? You look at President Trump, and the alt-right movement. Conservatives, they are completely in denial of the coronavirus situation. Um, and they're obviously fighting everybody else who clearly sees it, and I think they're sending mixed messages about that, and I think it's gonna bite them in the butt, right? Honestly. And then on the other side, we have economic realities, and this is the other part I wanted to get to, was the economic reality of, you look at the unemployment rate, you look at, economic GDP loss, you look at the stock market, all these things are clearly in the negative. Um, and I think there's there's a understandable reason that people want to open the economy back up, right? Because you don't want people to to lose their jobs and you have a depression, right? There's obviously a clear fear of that. So I think a lot of times people on that side who are just clearly focused just on the economics and not on the pandemic that's going on, they want to push it, right? And say, hey, we need to get this economy going. There's kind of I don't want to say a hard nose about it, but yeah, there's some people that are like, people are going to die. Old people are going to die. It happens every year with the flu or a new strain of, SARS or whatever. And so we shouldn't shut down our economy because of that. I think in terms of that argument, it's a very callous argument. I think it's a very um, inhumane argument. And I think those people view it as, I'm just telling you the truth, that we're going to have to lose some people to get the economy back up, which is a terrible argument, right? That's the same argument that, you know, communist Russia does to say, we need food supplies for the winter, so we're going to have to kill off 25 million people. That's not an argument you want to have. That's not an argument you want to make ever, right? We have ethics, we have morals, we have a care for humanity that we have to try. And so for that, I totally understand that people are worried about shutting the economy down, and that you know, people people may die. This is what they're going to say, and it's like, I mean, if you think about the people who are most at risk, it's the elderly, right? The people who were probably closer to the last time we've had to experience something like this, people with experience um, on how to get through this, and we're just, saying, okay, it's okay to throw them out because we need to push this economy out. And I don't think that's definitely not a path libertarians want to go into, is saying, we have to make some sacrifices. That's like a very that's a very fascist, communist argument. Like, not, you know, Russian communist argument, like, or Chinese, Chinese communism, right? Like, oh well, we have some food shortages, so we're gonna have to kill off a couple 25 million people to get there. Not an argument you want. Um, and it's not impossible. We need to find a way to help people get through this coronavirus pandemic and also get our economy back up. And I think there's some good arguments to say, if we are practicing, social distancing, wearing face masks, um, going out with the essentials, maybe, it seems like outdoors has less of a spread rate than indoors. So maybe we take our stuff outside, or, if we can abide by these rules, we should be able to open the economy up in a relatively safe way. There's still risks, right? But at least you're reducing those risks, and not having to put yourself at risk just to go and live a normal life. And same thing with our schools, right? There's a way for people to learn without putting themselves at risk. And I think maybe we're not balancing that enough, especially here in Texas. I know in Texas, TA was a big deal last week because they basically said, students can have the option of online or in person. But I think when you look at the realities of, the logistics of things, is that schools aren't going to be ready by August, right? I think about even my own job, right? Our work environment, our schools environments are designed for clustering people, to maximize the space, right? So you're fitting in 25, 30 people, 30 kids at a time. It's the same thing at work, right? You're trying to squeeze in people into like a cubicle situation. And there is no way you can guarantee that a spread won't happen in those places, especially with kids. You think about teenagers or middle schoolers, or even kindergartners. I mean, they love connection with other people. So immediately they're going to be hugging each other, getting close to each other. And then they're going to, if they carry something, they're going to give it to the teachers. Or if the teacher has something and they're going to give it to the kids. And if you have your teachers out, and the recovery times are like 60 days for coronavirus, what's going to happen if you have your entire teaching staff out? it's gonna be a madhouse. So I think, you know, learning to adapt into a dynamic is very important right now. And I think a lot of schools are leaning towards, online learning, because online learning is just as plausible as any other type of learning. And I think, unfortunately, I think President President Trump always throws a bunch of tweets, but I think he was tweeting the other day that we've learned online learning is ineffective. But that, none of the research in education is saying that, right? Most of the education is research is telling you that it's doable. You know, we need more research, we need more infrastructure, we need more focus on it to make it more effective. But students can learn in an online environment. And we all know that, right? Any adult knows that if they've done online university or, online YouTube videos just to like make a dinner, right? Or learn how to do something. You just YouTube it and you figure it out. Like, obviously the DIY projects don't come out as good as the experts, but that's about, you know, repetition and doing it again and again and learning from your mistakes. But I think for the most part, most adults know that we can do online learning. We've been doing it, you know, ever since YouTube started, and there's a lot of great resources out there. So I think that argument that online education is not possible is a lie. I think anybody who's done homeschooling knows it's possible. Anybody who's done online university knows it's possible. And I think the teachers, I have a personal bias because my wife is a teacher, but I think that teachers learning to teach online, like, a video conference or, sending out email materials or, doing maybe like a YouTube instruction type of thing. I think that's good for teachers because you're learning, new methods of how to teach, but also you're just focusing on teaching, right? And how to maximize each lesson, how to maximize the learning, instead of a lot of teachers, unfortunately, have to babysit more than teach, at school because they have to deal with the student's behavior versus just focusing on teaching. So teachers, I think, have a good opportunity to really hone in on how to teach. And, a lot of them already know how to do it. They just have to adapt it to a new environment. So I think it's a good way for teachers to focus on teaching and being good teachers. And then, and good or bad, I think it's good for parents. Parents now have to be, the way parents have done it for quite a while, is they have to be the arbiter or, the person that is monitoring their behavior. Because I think, most, especially recently, I mean, I feel like, I don't know if I'm just getting old, but I feel like parents recently in the last decade or two have like no responsibility for their kid, meaning they off the responsibilities of raising their kids to the teachers, and that's not how it should be, right? The teacher should be teaching, and if their kid gets in trouble, they're calling the parent and they're pushing that kid out of the class and saying, "Parent, you deal with this," and the parents should be the ones at home dealing with the disciplining of the kid. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen nowadays. Teachers are having to be the parent and the teacher at the same time. So I think this is probably a good thing that parents learn to parent again. I hate to say it, but discipline your kids. Tell them no. Give them a good environment of rules. And then slowly build them out of it. But I think this is a good opportunity to reassess what we're doing and why we're doing it, especially in this pandemic situation. And these are things that people had to deal with, like I said, over 100 years ago, right? In the last pandemic, the Spanish flu and the Great Depression and all this other stuff. Kids were homeschooled. Kids, moms and dads had to balance, having a family and going to work, and giving kids responsibility because they couldn't be there all the time. They had to leave, they had to go to work, so these kids were going to be at home on their own. So they have to figure out, how to be responsible, and I think a lot of that is good. Ultimately, I think maybe we drifted too far from that, especially about helping each other out and not being so selfish. I think
I think we're really going to take a turn for that, and I think it's like, I don't know, say it's being positive, but it's like trying to find the good things in the bad. It's something I naturally do, and I think a lot of people, even on my social media stuff, I'm posting a lot in terms of the growth rate of positive cases, the mortality rates, the the warning signs that we are not paying attention. I post a lot of that because I feel, unfortunately, that a lot of people are still being a little bit ignorant, a little bit high risk, and unfortunately, well, fortunately, I care about my friends and my family, even though they don't agree with me, but I do care about them, and I want them to be safe. And if they're doing unsafe behavior, I do have the feeling to intervene. Um, you know, Depending on how dangerous, obviously, but if somebody was drunk driving, you wouldn't let them get in the car, right? Likewise, if somebody's not wearing a mask, please wear a mask. At least ask. I don't think you should be afraid to ask people, hey, can you wear a mask, please? Um, Stuff like that. I think, obviously, if they say no, if they say whatever, then that's, I think for the mask thing, that's as much as you can go. But I know some people who are like, they're in a restaurant or a store who says, please wear a mask, and these people aren't wearing a mask, and they go to the manager and tell them, that's fair, right? So you just got to be careful. Um, Lots of layers of a lot of things going on, and again, I do want to apologize for not um, posting something sooner, but things have been. It's we're in a new reality, right? This is our new lives. Who knows how long it's going to be? I don't think it's short term. Maybe I could see a good, you know, year to 2 years of effect. Meaning, who knows when this is going to go away or when we can go back out and live normal lives. But for now, this is our new reality, and I think that was for me the mental switch, right? For me, I was thinking this is temporary, and when is it going to be over? And I was stressing out about prolonging this temporary. And I think once I realized, accepted, I would say more like this is our reality for the time being. I think the stress, when I say the stress went away, the stress is always there, but in terms of accepting it and saying, hey, this is how it is now, I have to stay home. I have to wear a mask if I go out. I have to be socially distant. Birthdays and celebrations, we're going to have to put those on the back burner for now, right? We can't interact the way we used to, but we can find ways to do that, right? I mean, thank God we live in this world now with technology and internet and television and Zoom and house party and all these other things that we still have an ability to interact with each other virtually, right? In some ways that we don't actually meet in person. I can't even imagine what it was like during the depression or during this influenza, the Spanish flu. I can't even imagine what it was like out there because you couldn't do anything. You had nothing, right? You just had books and the family you were living with, and I'm sure people got so stir crazy that they took risks that they shouldn't have. But I mean, thank God we live in this modern century where you have internet, you know, internet just in general, right? And then you have television, movies. Me personally, right? I'm a huge comic book fan. You can see everything behind me. We have comic books delivered to us. We have our groceries delivered to us. Apple TV, Netflix, house party. We've got social media. We've got this YouTube video, right? I have so many ways to interact with people for now that it's going to have to do. And I think that's, for me, was the mental switch. Was this is how it's going to be for now, right? Engage virtually, try to stay home. Obviously, I still go out for some small things. But when I do, I'm making sure I'm wearing a mask. I make sure I'm socially distant. If a place is crowded, I try to avoid it. Or if a place is people not wearing masks, I'm not going to go in there. So try to make some personal judgments out there. Don't let politics drive your decisions. Make your own personal safety the driver for your decision, and obviously the well-being for your family and yourself and your loved ones. And that means both, right? You have to figure out a way. You have to figure out the balance between health, safety, and your economic situation. So um, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, but I think it will really help us pull together the way it did with those generations ago. Where they experienced all this stuff right before World War II. So it was almost like it was an interesting culmination. That you had all these troughs that people had to get through, and it really helped pull the family together, pull the communities together, um, get that concept built in that we all are contributing something to the community, right? And making some sacrifices, individual sacrifices. And then you get into World War II, and you have the greatest generation, of people who didn't want to go to war, but they knew they need to stop this great evil. So hopefully this turns us into the people we need to be, versus the people of the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s, just the people who have never seen a depression, never had to make any sacrifices, never had to help each other. There was just so much bounty and plentifulness that I think it made us a little bit asleep at the wheel. So, anyways, just wanted to say, hey, hope everybody's doing okay out there. I'm going to try to get back into it. I think, in terms of my energy and my mood and all this other stuff, I'm finally finding the balance of when I can do this stuff versus, having it. Normally, in my schedule, is I would do it, on Fridays. Um, you know, get up and clean the house and do some chores, and then I would be like, all right, I got the energy. Let's do a podcast. And then I think lately it's just I realize my energy pattern has changed. So we're gonna try. We're gonna try to see if maybe Sundays. I'm posting all this on Sunday, and then sharing it out on social media on Mondays. But we'll see. We'll find the rhythm of how things work and try to get back into the groove of things, because I know there's a lot of people sitting at home, a lot of people trying to find a way to engage people, engage others, and get into the conversation, and I think that's a really good thing. I definitely miss my interaction with my friends physically, right? Going out and talking to them, going to the local libertarian happy hour and things like that. But we have to find a way to adapt for now, and I think virtual is the way to go. So find ways to engage virtually. Try to find some ways to have fun at the house. Try to go out. Try to find things that are entertaining to go out that don't involve interacting with people a lot, like we were talking about visiting the Museum of Natural Science or the Art Museum, or going out to a state park and stuff like that. So ways that you can be out but still not be at risk being clustered with other people. So anyways, lots of stuff going on. We didn't even get to the BLM protests, George Floyd, all that stuff. Another very important topic. The foundation of libertarians is civil liberties, right? And we see that with George Floyd and all this violence from law enforcement in terms of interacting with communities. There's so many layers into that I think that's probably going to take its own topic that we will probably explore on the next one, because I think it's going to take the whole time, right? But I think foundationally we understand that libertarianism is fundamentally about the state not violating individual rights, and that means life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when we look at how the state has set up our law enforcement to interact in the aggressive way that they do with our communities, like the African American community, Latino, illegal immigrants, stuff like that, the state has really put themselves in collision course with our communities. And I think we really need to look at that in multiple layers, not just the obvious inherent bias, towards African American and Latinos, but obviously how we've created a system to put our law enforcement at odds with our community, and ways in which we can resolve that. Because I think libertarians have been, from the very get-go, from the foundation, have been talking about this for a while before Republicans and Democrats even came on board with like criminal justice reform or police department audits and stuff like that. But it's there's a lot of stuff that's layered into that, that's baked into that we need to discuss. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to start another one just specifically on George Floyd, Black Lives Matters, all that stuff. I think we're going to have a very specific video about that because there's a lot going on. It's not black and white, right? It's not one person is 100% right, the other person is 100% wrong. There's shades of issues that we have to discuss, and we need to have a more fair and balanced perspective on that. Using Fox News terms. Fox News is terrible. But anyways, thanks everybody for watching. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm getting through this. Hopefully you're getting through this. Leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Like I said, now's the time to engage virtually, have discussions online, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere, right? Engage those facets, engage those conversations, engage with people you don't agree with. I think that's probably the healthiest thing versus just being in an echo chamber and talking to people that agree with you. You can really veer off from reality from that point. So engage with people you don't agree with, as long as you do it respectfully. I think that's the most important part. So anyways, see y'all soon. See you on the next one. Bye.